changing, we're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more, no more complaining people. Their lives are changing, we're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more, no more.
We had somebody send us an email and they were angry about something. I don't remember what it was, but it was something kind of silly, and there was certainly really no reason in my mind to get angry. But the person sent us an email anyway, and we were talking about how we should respond. Now, when someone says something to you, or when someone says something in an email or a text that is upsetting, our ego wants to go, oh yeah, and just jump right in. One of the greatest things to remember, we all have this ego, which many have said is a acronym, which means edging God out. Our ego is our human self. It is that part of our brain that is fearful, that looks at every person that we see as either a threat or a mate and tries to find out where they fall on that scale. Our egos are what keep us alive, and our egos are also what keep us unhappy, because our egos take things as being very, very upsetting. And so I want to encourage you today that before you compose a response to anything, you compose yourself. Before you compose a response, compose yourself. I used to work with a man back when I was in radio. This was back in my 30s. And I was managing a radio station, and this guy owned 3 stations, I think, at the time. And I went to talk to him because we had a consultant who was supposed to be helping us with the implementation of a new format. And the guy was not returning my phone calls, or if he did, he was being dismissive and not helpful. So I told my boss, and I remember this, I thought this was so interesting. He did the exact opposite of what I'm suggesting you do. He said, let me get off the phone now. And I said, why? He said, I want to call him while I'm still mad. The worst thing we can do is to get off the phone and then call somebody when we're still mad. Our ego tells us that that's what we need to do. It tells us that's what we have to do. It tells us that is the proper, very good, Linda. That is the proper comeback when someone does something upsetting to us, is to come back and get upset with them. I see it here in Miami when I'm driving to the airport all the time. I see people getting super upset with other people at the airport. And I see people getting upset driving as well. Linda has typed in STOP. That is an acronym from dialectical behavior therapy. It means stop. The S in stop stands for stop. The T stands for take a step back. Take a step back. The O stands for observe mindfully. And the P stands for proceed. Observe, rather, is the O. And the P stands for proceed mindfully. Most of us don't do that. Most of us are reactor factors. We just react. We just react. And we've got to fight that, especially when other people react to us. I was talking to somebody the other day and they said something and I was like, oh my gosh, that happens to me all the time. This person was trying to pass somebody on the interstate. There was plenty of room on the interstate, and this person was passing in a safe lane. And for some reason, the other person just did not want to be passed and was weaving back and forth in front of this person. They were brake checking this person. I blame this on social media, by the way. I know this sounds crazy, but I think it's caused by a couple of things. Number one, I truly believe that playing games like Grand Theft Auto, where you're kidnapping prostitutes and beating them, I've never played it, but that's what I hear. But driving as crazy and fast as you can, I think that somewhat has inspired people to do that. I also think these drifting movies, the Fast and the Furious movies, you see a lot of people in Miami wanting to try all this out. And so people are really just more easily aggravated today than they ever have been. And there are people who are seeking to aggravate more than ever before because we've got this diversity of media, which vilifies basically everybody who does not agree with them. One of the things I found most interesting, I meant to tell you yesterday, I said that I went to Las Vegas and I saw a couple of shows and did a speech. Now, when you think of Vegas, what's the saying about Vegas, right? They've changed it, by the way, but what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I noticed they changed it to something else as I was at the airport. What happens in Vegas creates a great memory or something like that. Anyway, they're trying to soften it. But Las Vegas is considered Sin City, baby. You can get anything you want in Las Vegas, you know? And not that I would know, but that's the way they present it. And yet, the interesting thing is, in Las Vegas, if you're going to be speaking or anywhere, everybody wears a mask. Everybody wears a mask. They have a mandate in Las Vegas, which is supposed to be the most free, liberal city in the country, where you're supposed to wear a mask. The interesting thing is I was waiting to go to the Michael Jackson 1 Cirque du Soleil show. I had actually gotten there like an hour early. So I left my seat, went to the restroom, and everyone in the men's room was packed. There must have been 40 guys in there. Everybody was wearing a mask. Why? Because everybody is asked to wear a mask. But as I said just a moment ago, there are people today seeking to upset other people more than ever before. So there was this guy, no mask, walking around the men's room, just from person to person, screaming at the top of his lungs, "We are not the descendants of fearful men. Take off your mask. We are not the descendants of fearful men." And everybody's looking at this guy like, what a nut. And what I thought was, you know what? We're the descendants of intelligent men, intelligent people who chose to get vaccinated, wear masks, and not spread a virus. But this guy's goal, he came in there to upset people. Same was true in that experience I shared with you that happened at the Miami airport. I was at the airport ready to get on a plane, and I'm looking at there's a bar right next to the gate, and they're showing this giant screen TV of somebody having an absolute meltdown. Where? In the very same airport where I am. The interesting thing is that this guy too was having a nutty about not wearing a mask, but he chose to go into the one place where you're absolutely required to wear a mask. Take this in. He parked his car, went in, and then started screaming and yelling about me. This guy was on a mission. I say all this today to acknowledge that it is harder today to maintain emotional equilibrium than it ever has before. It is harder today not to lash back at other people because people are angry and people are acting out in very childish and immature ways. Now, when that happens, our immediate reaction is, bah, go right back. I thought of a dozen things to say to this guy, and luckily I kept myself quiet. But our ego jumps in. Our ego thinks that we're a lot more fragile than we are, that someone giving us one particular finger on their hand as opposed to another particular finger on their hand is just this egregious upset thing. Oh, yeah, well, now I'm going to swerve you off the road. Things are elevated today like they never have been. And that is why it is so important for us, before we compose a response, to compose ourselves. Compose yourself before you compose a response. And what does that mean? It means, first and foremost, figuring out what you want the outcome of the conversation to be. In other words, do you want the outcome to be you telling this person off and showing them that you are right? Well, go right ahead, because I guarantee you that the person is going to come right back at you with more. I remember one time when I first moved here, my friend, I was on the interstate and I was trying to get a hold on these drivers here in Miami, and a friend of mine who is notorious for giving me bad advice said, "Oh, well, tap your brakes." Well, I did that one time to some guys who were tailgating me in a BMW on a one-lane road. They went around me on the shoulder and tried to run me off the road just for having tapped my brakes. Then they got in front of me and stomped their brakes, went down to zero. There was a line of traffic behind us. I thought at any minute they were going to get out with a gun. That's the way people are today. So what we've got to do is not to respond in kind. We've got to understand that there are people. Greg Bear, in his book Real Love, says that there are people who are walking around with a perpetual sunburn. Think about it. I love that analogy. People are walking around with a perpetual sunburn. And if you touch them, they're going to go, ah. And there are people walking around with a perpetual sunburn emotionally. I would call it they're perpetually pissed off. And the interesting thing is, when you're angry at other people like that, the only way to get yourself into that kind of a mode is to paint yourself a victim in your own mind. You've got to make yourself a victim in your own mind, which then rationalizes your bombastic and totally out of proportion behavior back to other people. So it's really simple. When we got this email the other day and somebody was upset about this and, oh, they called us a scam. I know what it was. We had sent this person's complaint-free bracelets, but for some reason, the post office had returned them back to our post office box. And they got all upset and called us, said it was a scam and all this kind of stuff. And we can try and respond to the fact that we're not a scam. We can be defensive, which is to defend ourselves. And finally, we just decided to just be very factual. And in many cases, that's the best thing. One of the things that I always say in my speeches is that facts are always neutral. If you're stating facts, it doesn't have anything to do with you or how dare you or anything like that. Facts are just neutral. So we said, we sent your bracelets on September whatever, and unfortunately they were returned in the post office returned to our post office box. We'll send new ones again. Please let us know when they arrive. A lot of this comes in my mind. It's fear is what it is. I noticed the other day that yesterday, that Islamorada, a couple islands down south of us, are having a trunk or treat show for children so that children don't have to go around and, get candy and get razor blades and needles in them. Do you know there has never been a proven case of that happening? Except once. There was an uncle of a boy, and the man was mentally ill, the uncle was, and he put some sort of, I think it was a needle or a razor blade in his kid's candy. And that's one time. And that's what has launched all this fear around Halloween. So people are very just like this. And I've noticed when I talk to people, I say, oh, is your child going to go trick-or-treating? No, they would never go trick-or-treating. It's so dangerous and all this. There's no proof for that. Human beings, in our need to protect ourselves, when we hear something negative or frightening, our ego latches onto it, and then that becomes our perspective. And here's the thing. It's easier and it's safer to accept the negative things that other people are saying than it is to research them for ourselves. It is easier to accept that, oh, people are poisoning kids with Halloween candy. It's just simply not true. But it's easier to believe that than to run the risk of having your child get hurt. So what I'm telling you is that you are probably walking around, if this is your normal level of upset, given the pandemic, given the politics, given everything else, is probably much more like this, which means it's a much shorter trip to snapping when something goes wrong. So the first and foremost thing I want to remind you is that when you're composing any kind of response, whether it's verbal or whether you are writing it or texting it, compose yourself. Make sure you are not upset, that you are not conveying this negative, upset energy. We got an email from somebody the other day as well. We had sent them a video 3 weeks ago, and they were supposed to pay us when they got the video. And now they came back saying they wanted changes in the video, even though the video was exactly like what we had promised them and showed them in everything. And so at first there was this feeling of, well, we need to defend what we did and everything. And finally we just said, let's take a few days to think about it. We don't have to reply. That's the other thing. My friend was so wrong when he said, let me call him now while I'm still mad. That's the worst thing you can do. Our ego tells us that. Our ego says you need that anger because that anger is jet fuel for you to make sure that you get your wrongs redressed. Nonsense. One of the things I've discovered over the years is that if you are dealing with anyone about an issue, the best thing you can do is smile and expect that person to do what it is you want and to do so nicely and kindly. We have to, as the note said just a moment ago, stop, S-T-O-P, stop, take a step back, observe, and then proceed mindfully. And proceeding mindfully means proceeding not like an upset, victimized person. And I say this now, there are times, I once knew a woman, this is a true story, who had several problems with this new car that she bought. And the people kept saying they were going to fix it and they didn't. And she got really, really terrible service. And so what she did was she pulled the car up to the front of the car dealership, broke the key off in the lock so that nobody could move the car, blocked the dealership and left the car. And that was a bit extreme. I don't know that necessarily she got her car repaired. The thing is that sometimes things seem, really big, especially if you go back and you go back. But I don't know about you. I've seen on Reddit people getting the wrong thing at McDonald's and them knocking everything off the counter. People are more wired and more upset today than they ever have been. And with good reason, in my opinion, with good reason. Enrage and engage. That's what media is all about. If I can enrage you, I can engage you. But then I don't have to deal with you because you're done with me. You've watched my media program, but now you're an enraged person walking out already ready. So be aware of the fact that you've got people who are walking around who are already more pissed off than usual, and that includes you too. So choose, as we used to say, choose which hill you want to die on. Is this a hill you want to die on? Potentially. This guy tailgating me, was that a hill I wanted to die on? I mean, that guy was literally at one point trying to run me into the Everglades. He was trying to kill me over the fact that I had tapped my brakes. Not a hill I want to die on. So what I changed was now when someone starts tailgating me, especially on the 17 miles of overseas highway that's one lane through the Everglades between here and Miami, what I do now is I adjust my mirror to where I can't even see the person. The person is a non-entity for me. They don't even exist. So more than anything today, I want you to compose yourself. Bring your best self to your problems. If you've got to talk to somebody about something, compose yourself. I've got to chat with some friends about an issue right now. And I'm looking forward to talking to them. But at the same time, I'm a little anxious about it. And so I want to make sure that when I do that, I come in as my highest, most loving, most understanding self with that idea of you weren't aware of what transpired. So let me talk with you nicely about how this affected me, and we're going to work it through. And if the other person gives you any sort of a feedback or whatever, just accept it. People are wired and on fire right now. I know that when my daughter and I went to Universal Studios back for Father's Day, I saw more people just cutting in line, just wanting to cut in line. Just what are you going to do if I cut in line in front of you? And the same is true when driving. And when the people were cutting in front of us, I let this happen. I let it happen. And I said, stop. The back of the line is back there. And the person looked at me like, what are you going to do about it? And about that time, several people turned around and said, yeah, the back of the line is back there. But the interesting thing is, my daughter said, I let karma handle this. I said, what do you mean? She said, you watch. Those people who've cut in line in front of us, you just watch. And she was right. As the line moved and shifted and everything, these people somehow got pushed to the back. So people are more demanding today because they feel more victimized today. They feel more angry today. And why? Because Fox News is telling them they're victimized, because CNN is telling them they're victimized, because NPR, the Wall Street Journal, this is affecting you. This is why you need to watch, which causes us to be upset. So choose your battles, choose what you're going to even get involved in. One of the things that used to drive me crazy was people who would run from the back of the plane to try and cut in front of everybody as we're getting off. As soon as we land, they come running from the back. And again, my daughter has decided, she taught me this, that if someone tries to do that, just let them go by. Just let them go by. There's nothing to prove here. If we get off a minute and a half later off the plane than this person does, it doesn't matter, because what we've kept is our calmness. I'll leave you with one more thing regarding this. One of the cool things they did on Mythbusters one time, two of the younger people, Grant and, I can't remember the other guy's name. But what they did was they gave them two cars, and I think they were like Mustangs or something, fast cars. And then they had to get across town in Los Angeles. It was like an hour and a half drive to go from one end of the city to the other. And they told one guy, we want you to drive as fast as you can. We will cover any speeding tickets you get. Cut between cars as quickly as you can to gain as much road as you can. They said to the other guy, we want you to simply drive, pick a lane, stay in that lane. Even if things slow down in that lane, stay in that lane. And at the end, they saw who got there faster. Well, sure enough, the guy was cutting lanes and everything and running the risk of hurting himself and other people and getting a ticket. He did, in fact, get there on a 90-minute trip 5 minutes earlier. 5 minutes earlier. And when they measured the guy's blood pressure, it was way higher than the person who simply picked a lane. Just because other people are acting crazy doesn't mean we need to. We need to find our calmness. And we need to, as Linda said there, STOP, stop, take a step back, breathe, compose yourself. Observe what's going on. Figure out how you want things to go, and then proceed mindfully. What that means is move in the direction of what you want while being nice and cheerful. And even if the person is being an insufferable ass, telling them that is not going to make them less. It's not like you can tell somebody, you're being a jerk, and they go, oh, I'm sorry. What do? They attack you even more. So in these crazy times, it's incumbent upon us to be even more sane, and you can be. Try it today. And since I said try it today,
no more complaining people, their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more complaining people, their lives are changing.